So let's say I'm somebody that has a passion point, whether it's ice skating or it's cooking, and I wanted to start an email newsletter. What is the very first step that you would tell them to take? Go ahead, Elizabeth, you start.
I'm sorry, so I want an ice skating newsletter and I'm creating one, is that right?
Any kind of passion point, whatever it is, you want to create a newsletter to reach an audience. If that's something that you know or you're an expert in, what's the first step that you would tell them to take?
They need to have good staff.
Okay, what kind of staff?
Again, as I mentioned in my speech, you can't say, I'm just going to get a writer. You actually need to have a writer who's passionate about product, passionate about audience as well, or maybe you get a product person who went to J school and figured, okay, how do we write, just as Dheerja mentioned, like you've got to have a nice conversational tone because it's very personal. So understanding kind of like this trifecta, this nice little triangle is key.
All right, Fernando?
Well, I would add to that, you have to have passionate people and people that actually love to do good journalism. That's very important. And I forgot to mention that the people that work with me doing the drive right now, they are the most important asset that we have. Without them, it would never be possible to do what I do.
Monica?
You use your journalism chops to gather people who love that thing and make it your mission to understand every angle of their passion. And not just every angle of their passion, but what they want, what they crave, what they need, what makes them so happy about ice skating, and what gets them concerned about ice skating. And you want to understand what they already read and where they feel the most sort of energy and, you know, kind of those aha moments where they come from for them as ice skating fans. You do that first and you design the product after.
Tapping into the passion. Dheerja?
I totally agree. So what I would actually say is don't start a newsletter. Talk to them. Is a newsletter the right form? Because I think the problem is if people think product first, which is like, I'm going to build a website, build a newsletter, build an app, you're doing it wrong. Like talk to the people, understand what types of information do they want, how do they want to connect with each other, when is that, like, and how often, and what part of their day and their routine, and then the newsletter might be the right way to go. But like you're starting 10 steps ahead if you're already thinking about, I have a newsletter.
All right, so you've identified a passion, you've hired good staff, you have gut checked your audience. How do you get people to know about it and sign up for it? We'll go back in the same order.
Well, there are many different ways that you can promote a newsletter. I think that what we learned at the Times and also what we've learned with some of the amazing folks on this panel, and I'm sure you all have some great newsletter skills too, but it's word of mouth, it's community. And making sure it's invaluable. It's so invaluable that they will forward to their friends and say, did you see this? You should sign up.
Forward to their friends to the point where you have a 230% open rate. Fernando?
Well, I think you should have a way to publicize what are you doing. If you have a news operation behind it, that will help a lot. If you were starting from scratch, that's much more difficult. But and then again, you got to know the audience you'll be talking to, and we'll build up from the scratch, so it is possible as well.
Monica?
You find the people who command the most sort of respect and already give a lot of value in that passion set of communities, and you talk to them before you're even launching whatever you're doing, and you ask their feedback on what you should do, and you partner with them on the launch content. And they spread it to their community, and their community learns about you. And every day you fight to prove to that community that you are really valuable and you're going to measure up to their passion and everything about it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you find your super fans. So anything from grassroots marketing to, I think our founders actually tabled at college campuses the first year. Like find those super fans and then give them a platform to tap into like an organic network. So I think we launched our referral program pretty early into the company where people would just write in and say, I love you guys so much, how can I help? That is incredible, right? And so then all you have to do is just let them tap into that. So we said, share it with 10 people and spread the word. And then that's actually how we built the Skimm Ambassador community too. So now it's at 30,000. When we started, it was share it with 10 people and you get invited into a community of like-minded individuals.
And Dheerja, I'm going to kick it back to you. Sure. How important is mobile?
I mean, like mobile is it, yes.
Designing clearly mobile first, yes. And then you also, I know you also have desktop products, you have social media products. Sure. Like, Do you start with mobile and you go out, or do you start with those things and go in? Talk to us about the strategy.
Yeah, I think it depends on which product you're talking about, right? So when you're thinking about like acquisition and sort of top of the funnel stuff, that is cross-platform. That's not just mobile. So for example, like literally your homepage needs to be optimized for desktop for email sign-up if they're coming in, while they're at work. But then when you think about like more closer to the middle or the bottom of the funnel, then it's a lot more about those daily routines and habits, and that's where we go very, very mobile first. So the best example of this is actually theSkimm.com, almost to an extreme, is just an email sign-up. We don't have like a content experience on there. We went straight from email to app when it came to like the actual like user journey of being part of theSkimm.
Fernando, how do you get high-level influential people to sign up and to read it? You were saying that the most important people in the capital, in Brasilia, are taking a look at your product.
Before I say, can I just add something to that? We have 95% of our audience mobile. So I come from a developing country, Brazil, and probably we do have less desktop computers than in other places of the first world, the developed world like the United States. So we actually designed it mostly for mobile. And how do I get people to subscribe? Because they know the powers that be in Brasilia will be reading that. And those people in Brasilia, those political operatives, the congressmen, senators, ministers, whatever, they will talk to people in São Paulo where the money is. And those people will ask them, where did you read that? And they said, well, I read that on the drive. So they will be subscribing. They are my best publicity, I think.
Mónica, when you take a look at that events calendar and you try to match up certain events to certain emojis, how did you get your audience to understand which emojis meant for which events?
Oh, we put it in the newsletter.
So you say, this red balloon indicates family event.
Yeah, there was one day where we said, hey, we've been getting tons of feedback from you throughout on this events calendar. We've heard from, those of you who it's hard for you to get a babysitter, those of you who, I'm more introverted and I really just want to learn, those of you who are still out there looking for friends and are kind of open to new experiences and connections. And we want to serve you all, and we wanted to make it easier for you to figure out what events we have selected precisely for you and your uses. So here's the code.
Elisabeth, how do you determine which newsletters you launch? Obviously, Game of Thrones is hugely popular, but there are many hugely popular shows. What's the decision-making process? Are journalists pitching you? Are you going to journalists and saying, would you be interested in this? How does it work?
As we all know, there's a renaissance right now with email newsletters. So I'm getting a lot of pitches. I'm coming up with ideas as well. Really, we have an entire pitch process. Again, I'm so lucky. I work with a great newsroom, and it's a pretty big newsroom right now, considering the environment we're in right now. So I've actually created a pitch form asking a lot of these questions that you should really ask before saying, hey, I think I want a newsletter. Well, it's a baby. You got to take care of it. You got to refine it. So we have a pitch document and saying, how does this work with our greater corporate goals? Who's going to take care of it when you're sick? What kind of things are you going to set it apart from the competitors? What are the competitors? What is the competitive landscape? Asking all of these questions ahead of time will, yes, make sure that the newsletter product is the right way to go. And then two, to really make sure it's worth everyone's while to do this.
I want a copy of what that pitch form looks like. I want to take some questions from the audience. We have the foremost newsletter experts up here, so let us know your thoughts. And introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Peter from Slovakia. I want to ask you, what is the business model of your newsletters? Because you get a lot of traffic, you get a lot of people reading it. What's the next step with that audience? And also, for Fernando, you have paid subscription to your newsletter. What is the price of it? Thank you.
Okay. Right. Well, there are basically two business models. One is a free newsletter, then you have to massify it and have it read by tons of people like theSkimm, which is an incredible success. And then you have paid newsletters, which is our model. And we are actually now moving into another product, which will be the free newsletter, which will be massified. And then we have ads into that. The paid newsletter, it depends. The price you're going to put onto that is the one you need to sustain your newsroom. For us, it has a ticket price on average. We don't actually say that much because it depends on how many emails we'll be receiving per subscriptions, because we sell the subscriptions to corporations. We don't sell to individuals, because that would have made it much more difficult for us to kind of govern the whole thing. And nowadays, I would say that the average price for one email within, say, a subscription or of, say, 15 or 20 people that will receive it on a corporation will be around, that's not a fixed price, but around $100.
Anyone else have any thoughts on monetization?
Yeah, I can touch into that. So overall, as a company, we have 4 revenue streams, and we believe, as I think a lot of companies do now, in diversified revenue. For the email specifically, we monetize it in 2 ways. So we have native advertising, where we really take brands that the audience is interested in, so anything from a Starbucks to a Netflix, but we make sure it's like truly native content and it isn't like sort of, again, ruining the experience. And then we also are really big on affiliates. It's a huge business for us. We're the #1 driver to sell books to female millennials right now. And so it's really about like not just, again, shoving them buy buttons, but really saying like, hey, we're tastemakers, we're friends, us and this audience. Here are the things that we like and like to do and like to read, and we sell a lot.
Awesome. We got a question over here, and then Josh Benton.
Hey, I'm Will Anderson. I'm with the Austin Business Journal. I hope this is okay to ask, but since we're competing in our readers' inboxes for attention with great newsletters like yours, when it comes to open rate, what can we be doing better to make sure they open our emails first instead of yours?
Use emojis. Use emojis. I'm not kidding. People tell us all the time that the fact that we have an emoji in the subject line of our newsletter means they can find it in the mess. FYI.
That's true, yeah.
It's a
Totally
tiny,
agree.
silly little thing, but it works.
No, and we're small too, so that is great insight too, because we don't have 8 million subscribers.
Any other tips?
Test.
Testing timing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just generally, when people open your newsletter, how do you make them feel? How do they feel by the end of it?
Yeah.
We have a rule for our outro, the last thing that we say. It can never be a sad thing. You don't want to be like, oh, and by the way, bye. No. We try to, sometimes we'll drop a GIF that's related to something really delightful that happened locally, I don't know. But send them off to their day feeling good. Everything else on their phone stresses them out.
Yeah.
And so they'll come back the next morning going, okay, I'm opening my email, but let me check the Evergrey and it'll give me a little boost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just add one more thing. I think it's obviously a combination of so many factors, right? It's like what they actually get out of it every single day. The subject line does factor into it, send time. But what I would say is you kind of just know when somebody is scrolling through their inbox and they see an email and they're like, ugh, do I just delete it, archive it? Do I have to open it? Versus they're excited to open it, right? And that's something you should just be striving for. And so again, I'm really big on just talking to people. So we do a lot of research with our audience on even when they've turned out or stopped opening, just to understand why. Because it's a combination of all those factors. You got to make sure your strategy is kind of going in the right direction there.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, Josh Benton, last question.
Yeah, my question is sort of related to that, in that my inbox has way too many newsletters in it, and I feel the same way that Twitter eventually became too crowded and Facebook eventually became too crowded. My inbox is feeling very similar, and I'm wondering, and I think for me personally, I see the ones that are very long, that are comprehensive, like Mike Allen's, for example, and I think, it's beautifully done, but it's a slog. I just can't do it. I'm wondering if you're seeing any trends or seeing anything in A/B testing around length or anything else that is sort of like the weight of the job of opening that email in the morning.
I'll start because we talk a lot about smart brevity. I definitely think enumerating stories is helpful, because if you can get somebody accustomed to the amount of stories that you're going to read, and then they know that they're halfway through if they've gotten to number 5, you're giving them cues to help them understand what speed they should be approaching it with. And the other thing I'd say too is that length does affect engagement. In this day and age, people are so inundated with stuff that we do try to be mindful of keeping things as short as possible. And that's where linking out in a smart way can be really helpful. So you can say, let's say I'm writing a story about Google and Facebook and everything happening on Capitol Hill. I could link out, but do it in a cool, fun way. Maybe you'll say something like, go deeper, ... This ain't the first time this has happened. Or go deeper, ... My friend called this 8 months ago. And I probably would link to something you wrote.
We've found, and I can't say we've tested, we haven't done large-scale testing, but the formatting of the newsletter, I think, is just as important as the length. So in the Evergrey, for example, we hardly ever start a paragraph with a pronoun because you have to think about skimmers. You have to think about people who are skimming and looking for a paragraph to land on. So we often, if we feel like a paragraph is a real anchor paragraph, you bold the first sentence. You never start with a pronoun because people don't know what you're talking about, so they'll just skim on because they don't have a place to land. In other words, each newsletter should have several landing spots and give people that, you know, those anchors, those moments, boom, 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 because a lot of them are not going to read all the way through, but you don't want them to miss out just because they're busy.
We are really trying to write differently for our newsletters and short, nice paragraphs in which you can skim. I mean, that's a key thing where I go and try to educate the newsroom about.
You know, I borrowed the concept which I found incredibly great, which is the smart brevity from Axios. I was here last year, Dean Van de Heij was here explaining all that concept, and I thought, well, this is such a great way to define how a newsletter should be. We try to keep it short. It's a struggle. We have 3 editions a day. We have to struggle to cut out lots of notes sent from reporters. Then there is a fight after we close all editions because the reporters will say, why my story didn't get in? But, you know, the smart brevity, that's the way to say.
It's really hard to write short.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to thank you all so much for tuning into this panel. A round of applause to our great panelists. Thank you to Rosenthal and ISOJ.